Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Legendary crooner Paul Anka performs live at Strathmore in North Bethesda next Tuesday, June 21st for Anka Sings Sinatra, His Songs, My Way. I spoke to Anka about his biggest hits, from Put Your Head on My Shoulder to Puppy Love, as well as writing the Tonight Show theme for Johnny Carson and the iconic song My Way for Frank Sinatra.
Hello.
Hey, Paul Anka.
Hi, Jason. Paul.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, sir.
Now, we spoke to you, actually. You called in probably, years ago, like in 2015 or something. So we invite our listeners.
I called you in on the new album.
Yeah, I think so.
We spoke, I think, a while back.
We did. Yeah. So we invite our listeners to check that out in the archives. But today, we're glad you're back promoting, you're coming to Strathmore. It's called An Evening with Paul Anka. Anka Sings Sinatra, His Songs, My Way on June 21st. Is it all Sinatra? I assume it's his songs, your songs.
No. I can't forget my core bass, my American Bandstand friends. We're doing a kind of a combination of both. There's a bunch of hits, stuff I've written for other people. I'm doing the Michael Jackson, Tom Jones, and I'm only doing a segment, few songs of Sinatra. Yeah.
Gotcha. Are you allowed to say which ones? I assume one is My Way, which you wrote for him.
Yeah, we'll be doing a couple that I've written for him. Let Me Try Again. I'll be doing My Way, and then some great arrangements that he gave me. I'll be doing a few of those. I'll leave the titles out, keep the surprise up, and then got a tribute to Sammy Davis. But I'm anxious to get back to that theater because the last time we were there, we had a wild, sold-out crowd, and they were very enthusiastic. So we're looking forward to getting back there again.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful building. I remember the first time I walked in there, I wasn't prepared for how grand it looks in there. It's an amazing space to play. I'm sure the acoustics are great, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, of course, we mentioned that you wrote My Way. I'll get to that in a second, but I'd like to always sort of move chronologically if we could. I'd love to remind our listeners, like, where exactly you grew up, how'd you got into music to begin with?
Well, Ottawa, Canada. That's where I grew up. That's where I was born. I wanted to be a journalist and a writer, but that went by the wayside after they tried to throw shorthand at me. So I took music, and I started writing. I had a band, at 13 or 14. Saw a girl I had a crush on. Her name was Diana, but she was older. Wanted nothing to do with me. And from that point, I was just playing it at parties, and ultimately, I talked my dad into letting me go to New York on Easter break. I had a paper route, and I was a caddy, and I saved up some money and had some friends down here. And I just took my songs up to ABC Paramount. So it started when I was 15 with Diana, and that kind of changed my life. And started touring with all my friends, the Everly Brothers and Frankie Avalon and Fabian, Chuck Berry, the Platters, that whole group. So it really was a launching pad. When pop music was in its infancy stage back then, no one really had any indication, obviously, where we're at today. And I just started touring with these guys. In fact, I lived in Washington on Connecticut Avenue. My partner was the Feld family, who owned some super drugstores. And my career went from there. And, I spent a lot of time in Europe. That's where I met the Beatles and came home and told my agent about them. And they flew over and brought them over here, so I was kind of responsible for them coming to this country and changed the whole landscape of the music industry, which they did. They opened the doors to acceptance. We were not really an accepted, group of musicians other than for our fans. And then it just kind of evolved from there. And my first real experience writing for others was for my Buddy Holly, who was my dear, dear friend. And I wrote It Doesn't Matter Anymore for him, and fortunately, the last song he ever recorded, he died in one of the tours, and that was a very sad moment. But that song, I'll be doing a whole kind of dedication to him on stage with that, and that really got me into the kind of vibe of writing for others, because I wasn't sure how long I was going to last just writing my own stuff. I was still a teenager, and I kind of committed myself to writing for other people whenever I could. Thus, Buddy and Connie Francis and Tonight Show theme, Longest Day, and it just went from there right into the 60s.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Diana there as your sort of your one of your first big ones. Tell me about. I think believe last time you told us that your personal favorite was "Put Your Head on My Shoulder." That's my personal favorite of yours too. And recently, there's a new artist, Doja Cat, that sort of sampled it. So a new generation. What do you think when you hear a new generation sampling such a classic like that of yours?
Well, it's been an experience, like a 40 million down. I mean, it's bizarre. We've got, teenagers at the show. They're coming up for autographs, and they've got albums, and you got to be humbled by it. Who knew? Who knew TikTok was coming at us? So when you've got the success of that song that was, I wrote it at 17, and
Yeah.
certainly my favorite from back then, and all the action that it's getting now, and the new fan base, it's amazing. I've been doing this for a few years, and to all of a sudden see this whole new demographic, if you will, embracing that song and all the oldies. I'm getting a huge kick out of it. I mean, I'm just totally, as I said, humbled by the fact that we know music's a big part of our life, and we know that it will always be around us. But for it to kind of articulate itself into the young generation, I'm getting the biggest kick out of it. And her record was fantastic. She does her own thing. So I've been watching it unfold, and certainly watching it today, and I'm loving every minute of it. Every minute of it. Now, Puppy Love is starting to bubble out of there, so it's cool.
Yeah,
Real
tell me.
cool.
So real quick before we move to Puppy Love, tell me about I wanted to ask you about the Doja Cat sample, but tell me a little more about the actual original recording of "Put Your Head on My Shoulder." What inspired it?
Well, I was living all of a sudden that new life,
Yeah.
and not unindigenous today. When you look at these young artists, you're living a isolated life at times. You got thousands of fans running after you, and you're locked away in rooms. And back then we did promotion on records, and it was doing these record hops for DJs to get your records played. So DJs all over the country would invite you to come and do these record hops, which were a DJ event, and 300-400 kids show up and dance. And I was up there lip syncing one of my records, and I saw them all holding each other and putting their heads on each other's shoulders, which was the big challenge back then. If you got that far, you really scored, right?
That's some
So
risque stuff
went
back
back to
then.
my
A head on
hotel
a
room.
shoulder. Ooh, that's
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I just went back to my room, and I said, "Shit, I'm not enjoying any of that, but wow, that's inspiring." And I think I'd mentioned back then with you, I wrote it and called Annette, who was kind of dating at the time. I wrote Puppy Love for her, and I kind of sang it to her, and that's the origin of that song. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, my favorite part is how you always go, baby. That's the best part, in my humble
Oh
opinion.
yeah.
Cool. And
Well,
I
we
know.
accept it.
Say again.
I said I accept that,
Oh, you accept that.
baby.
Very cool, baby.
Yeah.
Well, it's awesome. I know around that time it probably would have gone number one, but that dastardly friend of yours, Bobby Darin, that Mac the Knife, a little
Bobby
song,
Darin, back the knife.
just a little
Yeah,
song. You
I
might have
told you
heard of
that
it.
story. Yeah, well, we were friends. He was a great artist, and we would always, tease about that. But Shoulder did, was number two there for a while, and after a while, you don't care. It's only number stuff.
Yeah.
But it was one of the most, successful of
Yeah.
that and Lonely Boy back then. And
Yeah.
Darren started getting into the whole swing thing, which I did. I got into swings with Young Lovers. We had a hit with Hello Young Lovers, but we were kids. We didn't know what the future was. We kind of wanted to emanate the Rat Pack. That was our goal.
Yeah.
Looking at them and wanting to be like them, which eventually I made that evolution into that whole world because I felt I needed to survive. Yeah, but Mac the Knife, that was the door blocker, but I didn't mind because I really loved Bobby. He was a great artist.
Yeah, but
Great
so
artist.
he might have got the last laugh, slightly edging you out with that. But then when it came time for him to do Beyond the Sea and you to do Puppy Love, I think you charged ahead of him and beat him in the horse race that time. So tell us any memories of how you came up with Puppy Love? Like, what was that? Wasn't it something to do with like Disney saying that something with the Disney property?
Well, it had to do with Disney and Annette because I was dating her, and they were very concerned. Obviously, back in the 50s, it was a whole different approach to sexuality and dating and everything. And she was a friend, and we got close, and they were concerned because of imaging. She was America's sweetheart, and here I was, a frisky little teenager. And they were trying to break us up, and they kept hitting us with the line, it's not meaningful, and it's just a puppy love, etc. And we both started feeling the heat of breaking up, and I just sat down and said, okay, here you go. And they called it Puppy Love and rolled it right into Donny Osmond, and that had its whole other life. But that's how that song started.
Great. And of course, you mentioned you started writing songs for a bunch of other people. You said Connie Francis, who did Teddy, Buddy Holly, it doesn't matter anymore. Mm-hmm. Tom Jones, She's a Lady. What was it like working with Tom Jones? I mean, that was a unique cat. His voice was all I loved some Tom Jones, man.
He's a great singer. Well, I met him, we hung out a lot when they came to the United States, and he would always ask me, him and his manager, because they loved My Way and my song Papa, and they were, kind of into my music, and it said I've never had a number one record in the United States, which is true. All his records, when you check it out, they were, top 10, top 20, and really a very unique talent. I mean, incredible voice, and they were very successful, him and Engelbert Humperdinck, who I wrote for. Yeah. And I went and did his TV show in England, and we were partying and having a good time, and I kind of studied his whole vibe. It was all sexuality and that great voice. And I think I told you back then, on the way home from London, I wrote it on the back of a menu. I think it was TWA. I wrote the words, and I started the song and sent them the demo, and they loved it. And it was his first number one record in the United States. She's a Lady.
Wow. I mean, it is a gem. Well, maybe time for one more before we wrap it back around to, sure. the My Way and stuff. But I want to know, you mentioned that you wrote the iconic Tonight Show theme, the one that Johnny Carson would come out to, the famous one. How did they recruit you to do that? And like, sort of, what were you sort of going for musically when you're like, okay, I need something that wakes people up at night, gets them excited for these jokes, but you know what I mean?
Totally.
How do you get tasked to do that?
Yeah. Well, really simple. I'd hired Johnny to come to England to be a comic on my TV special, way before he really became famous. And I liked him a lot. And I just ran into him in New York post the TV special. And I said, what are you up to? He said, well, I'm going to do this Tonight Show thing for about a year or two. Ha, 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 right? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm changing this and changing that. He says, I want a new theme on there. I said, yeah, you talked to the right guy. So as you appropriately said, I said, what's simple? Da-da-da-da-da, because I knew it wasn't going to go on for 3 minutes. So it was simple, did the demo, brass. The backstory is that Skitch Henderson, who was the conductor, he was 3 times my age, I think. He said, I don't want any kid writing that this is my show and I was here first, all that baloney. And Johnny gave me the bad news. I said, wow. I said, because I got something cool. And I said, by the way, John, I'll give you half the song, all the royalties. So 24 hours later, I got a call. He said, you got it. So, we didn't know it was going to be on for umpteen years. Real successful. And I was very proud of that because it was that same time that I wrote the theme to The Longest Day. Which,
you wrote the theme to you mean the John Wayne movie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You wrote
the film and then talked Mr. Zanuck into using it because there was no music in the film. Mm-hmm. So I wrote The Longest Day for Mr. Zanuck and the film, yeah.
Wow. I see. That's when I talk to legends like yourself. That's the kind of stuff I love. I mean, we got to hit the highlights, Puppy Love and Head on My Shoulder, etc. But I love when we find out that, oh, by the way, you've been listening to the Tonight Show theme your whole life or watching The Longest Day your whole life, and you didn't know that Mr. Paul Anka wrote that too. I love it. Well, bringing it full circle then, I guess, because this concert, it's called, His Songs, My Way. You remind our listeners that story. I guess you felt you were too young to sing My Way. You were like late 20s, so you gave it to Sinatra. Like, how do you write a song that's, I mean, you're looking back at a career that opens with and now the end is here and facing the final curtain, but you were just getting started at the time. So how did you get yourself in the mindset to kind of write as a veteran, even though you were a beginner?
Well, you're wearing separate hats.
Yeah.
And when I realized early that I was the writer and I was going to work at my craft, at a real young age, it's Longest Day and Tonight Show theme. I mean, stuff that's really not about what I was writing about. And hanging out with the Rat Pack and knowing those guys all those years, it kind of culminated into when he and I called me for dinner in Florida. I was, I don't know, 25, 26 years old, but, I'd always done a few years with these guys in Vegas. And, I would have given them money back for, carrying on and learning what I did with those guys.
Right.
And at dinner one night in Florida, he had mentioned to me, because he'd always teased me because he hated pop music and Presley and all that stuff. He was into the American standard stuff. And he said to me at dinner, he said, I'm quitting show business. I'm going to retire. I've had enough. The Rat Pack was winding down, and people were all, government and all that stuff were all after him anyway. He said, I'm doing one more album with Don Costa. And Don Costa was the guy that found me and who I introduced to Sinatra and recorded a lot of great hits with him. And he said, I'm doing one more album, kid, because that was my nickname. I was, they're all twice my age. And he said, he was teasing. He never wrote me a song. And so anyway, I went back to New York and from Florida, and I couldn't believe it. This is Sinatra you're talking about, quitting. And I think it was around midnight. I think I even told you that story. Big thunderstorm outside, and I was just sitting there with this melody that I had, and I just said to myself, Sinatra quitting. I couldn't get it. So metaphorically, I started writing it as if he were, not me. I'm the writer, but I'm, whether it was Tom or anyone I've written for, I've studied their style, and it's almost like typecasting in a film.
Right.
And I just started writing it as if Sinatra were writing it, and now the end is near. And saying things I would never approach, ate it up and spit it out, and I knew his jargon, I knew his way, his swagger.
Yeah.
And I finished it about 5 hours later, and I called him in Las Vegas. He was doing one of his last dates at Caesars. And I said, hey, sir, I got something I think you might like. He said, fly out. I flew out, and I played it to him in his dressing room at night that I arrived. And he just looked at me, and I could tell by his vibe, his body language, that he liked it because he was never, a 4-minute guy of praise. And he said, I'm going to do it. Anyway, fade out, fade in. About 2-3 months later, I'm in New York, and I get a call from a record studio in Los Angeles. And the operator says, Frank Sinatra calling. And he gets on, and he says, kid, he said, listen to this. He took the phone, and he stuck it up into a speaker. And I heard it all the way from Los Angeles for the first time. And I got to tell you, I started crying. I couldn't. I knew right then that my life had changed in the sense of my gravitas as a writer, and it was huge for both of us. And he retired, but the kick is that a couple of years later, called me back. He said, "I'm coming back. I'm coming back to show business. Write me another one." And I wrote "Let Me Try Again," which I'll be featuring on the show. But that was the second song that he introduced at Madison Square Gardens when he came back for the main event. So that was a huge turning point and a huge kind of emotional moment for me and for him, because that song kind of turned things around for both of us, frankly.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. I love that story and the
image.
You
get those moments that you when you're dealing with music, you never know where and how this stuff lands. Nobody's got the crystal ball, and to live through that, and then to live through writing the last 3 Michael Jackson hits. It was culminating with Drake on his album with one of the songs. It's kind of a wild landscape to work with, the great artists that are one of a kind, and just working with Michael and the whole backstory of songs we started and stealing my tapes, and then they record them and they don't know that I wrote them, and then all of a sudden I've got This Is It, Love Never Felt So Good, and It Don't Matter to Me with Drake. It shows you karma's got everybody's address. So that was the next big musical moment for me, is having the last 3 Michael Jackson hits.
Yeah, and I think even that big farewell tour he never really got to do. He called This Is It, and you wrote that song. So, wow, thanks for that.
Yeah, they called This Is It. They found it in his drawer. They didn't know. They thought it was his because I originally started. The song was called "I Never Heard,"
Right.
and it was just like disappeared till we found out that he'd re-recorded the tapes. They found him, thinking he wrote it. They sweetened the tracks up that I made.
Hmm.
Somebody got wind of it and called me. I think it was Harvey Levin at TMZ. He said, "We hear blah blah blah." I said, "No, I didn't. I don't know anything about This Is It." So they let me hear it, and then I figured it out. The first line of the song is, "This is it, here I stand." But the song and the hook was, "I never heard a single word." That was my main title. So that was a big surprise, and to them, because I'd called them with my lawyers, and they'd screwed me in the beginning with it when they let them take the tapes. And I said, "Okay, now we're getting even, folks. 50% of everything."
Wow, that's funny. That sort of came out
Yeah,
of
and
nowhere.
it
It
was and
surprised
Love Never
everybody.
Felt So Good was Love Never Felt So Good was a great record. Timberlake and him, I just loved that track. They did a great job on that song. It was Michael and Justin. I just wrote it, but that was a huge international record. It was the follow-up to This Is It. Yeah.
Wow, wow. I mean, you've done a little bit of everything. It's pretty wild. And it spans generations, like we were talking about with the Doja Cat thing in the beginning. It's pretty wild. Are there before we run, are there any lyrics in that, in My Way, at the time you wrote it just trying to put yourself in Sinatra's shoes, but now that you've lived a full life and had a full career, sort of like Sinatra had at the time when you're writing it, are there any lines that strike you differently now? Like regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. Is there anything that sits
Well, they're all
different
a
with you
part of my
now?
life. It's all a part. Now it's all real. When I introduced it and singing it on stage, it was just as the presenter and the author of the work. But now it's very meaningful. Every line works for me now.
Yeah,
Whereas it didn't. I was 26 years old.
yeah,
But today, at my age, absolutely. Now it all works superbly well, and more. I mean, the emotion and the meaning that I get out of it doing it now presses a lot of buttons more so than when I was
yeah.
26. I was still feeling my way, frankly, but living in the whole kind of atmosphere, the success of the song, the kid, frankly, okay, young man. But now, oh God, give it to me every day.
Yeah, he sort of grew into each and every one of those lyrics. It's a whole new perspective. Is a son of a gun. Well, wow, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Keep it going. The thing is to keep on keeping on. I don't. I've had. I've been so blessed with. We're on our tour now. We're just sold out. We're going to Europe. July, we're sold to fans. We did 4,000 people the other night, 3,000 in Atlantic. So we're enjoying all of this work that I don't get the vibe from people till I sing in front of them, and the fans have been just so amazing that I keep on just doing this, the way I want to. I don't work a lot. I just do what I want to do because of the passion and because of the fan base. And it's a big kick to be able to be doing that right now, coming out of this whole COVID-19 thing. And looking back, and I do the whole story on stage. And I was talking to my friend Michael Bublé, who I started and produced his first album. And I got Michael started and seeing where he is today. And we were just talking the other day about how far he's come. And I keep giving him what wisdom I can in terms of his career. He's a great artist, and to be able to launch him and help him get started and help raise the money when nobody even wanted to listen to the kid, it's things like that when you stay in action, you keep doing it, things happen. You can't sit back on your laurels and the money and all that. That's all BS because it's just so meaningless. At the end of the day, we're all meaningless, in this big universe.
Right.
So it's making those moments happen creatively when you're in that kind of rare position and you're able to do it and have, a fan base that supports you and gets it and that shows it to you, because when you write and you sit at home, there's a huge black hole between you and your public. I have no idea how I'm affecting them. That only comes across when you're up on that stage and getting the feedback from them personally. I mean, it's just crazy with the, these teenagers now with the TikTok and the passion of the audiences now, and they're very selective in how they're spending their money. I graciously take all of that and what it means in my life to be still doing it, because I know a lot of guys that just can't do it anymore and aren't doing it. They're all, poor Mick's got 19 and Justin's sick, and you never know from day to day who's getting flattened out for a while. It's a sad story, but when you've got a creative life and you've been blessed with that stuff, you got to do it. If you're loving it up there, you got your health, just do it till it rides out, because otherwise, it's a life lottery. Who's next?
Yeah. Well, you still got it, and you're still doing it, and we're glad you're doing it. Real quick, final seconds. Remind our listeners that your famous son-in-law, Jason Bateman. What'd you make of that Ozark finale? Do you watch that?
So proud of him, man. Are you kidding? Is the Pope pray?
Is the Pope Catholic?
The Pope pray. I know beforehand what's happening. I'm so proud of Jason. He's a great guy. He wants to do some directing now. My daughter's in there running the show with him, and they're great kids. He's such a talented guy, and he's such a nice guy. And at the end of the day, family is everything. You can't really depend on much things in life, because come in alone, go out alone. But he's good family, and I love my family around me, and I love his whole attitude with his success. And he's a talented guy. There's more to come from him, folks. Just stand by. It's coming.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's plenty more to come from you too, sir. Everyone, again, it is An Evening with Paul Anka. He's going to sing Sinatra, his songs, My Way. It'll be at the Strathmore in North Bethesda, Maryland on Tuesday, June 21st. So get your tickets now, strathmore.org. Hey, Paul Anka, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's always a pleasure talking with you. You always do these deep dives.
I appreciate you having talked to me again. And by the way, we've got we're rolling out our PBS special this month all over the country. We've got the new album, Sessions, coming out, and we're in the midst of making the documentary of my life, and that'll be on next year. And we're working real hard with that. But look out for the PBS special. That's rolling out this month.
What's that? What is it called? What's the special?
I just did a big special for PBS in Las Vegas.
Oh, cool.
And it's starting to air all over the country, recorded in Las Vegas.
Oh, that's going to be great. All right. Yeah, everyone.
PBS. Yeah, it's airing now.
Everyone check out this concert at Strathmore, and then set the DVRs for the PBS. You get a double dose of Paul Anka this month. I love it. Hey, thank you so much. You always have great stories every time you come on.
Well, I appreciate that. You'll hear them all on the documentary next year.
All right. We'll stay tuned for that. Maybe we'll talk to you again then.
Sounds
good.
Pal. Thanks.
Take it easy.
Be well.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.